Hi, my name is Rebecca Pratt, and this is my English Step 2 through 5 vlog, which you just saw. So, I watched the video, and there was a lot of information, so I will most likely miss a lot of it. But the first thing he talked about is how words can be construed and translated differently. Like, we have World Wide Web, and what the French use for World Wide Web directly translates into English as the World Spider Web. And then he made some jokes that I didn't fully understand. And then he starts talking about how a verb is the main component of a sentence. Whatever you choose as your verb can completely change your sentence. So I can say I went to the store, but if I change the nouns, the store went to me. It now doesn't make any sense because the store cannot physically come to me. And then he also had sentences where you could change the nouns around and it wouldn't change the meaning, like Johnny taught the children Spanish or Johnny taught Spanish to the children. Changing those two nouns didn't change the meaning of the sentence, it just kind of changed the way it was said. Then he talks about the speeches being like a human interaction. How you talk to people is changes depending on your relationship with them. So I wouldn't talk to my boss at work the same way I would talk to my mom or my sisters. I wouldn't walk up to my boss and be like, oh my gosh, I just went to the coolest movie last night, because I don't have that personal relationship with my boss, but I will gladly do that with my sisters. He said there's a bunch of different relationships, and the ones that stuck out most to me were family relationships, people you're actually related to or married to or have, as in children and such. And then there's groups who have family-like connections but are not related to each other, like fraternities and sororities. And then there are mismatched connections. And when I first heard this, it made me think of like when someone thinks the other person is really into them, but they're not. So I could think Bob over there really likes me, but really he's just kind of so-so about me. And kind of that's what it went down to. So the examples he used were like sexual tension in a workplace, like where it crosses the line into sexual harassment, and like feeling comfortable with a boss. Like you may feel more comfortable with your boss than he's comfortable with you, or vice versa. Your boss may be like super comfortable, like come to work in jeans every day, whereas you are like, this is my workplace, this is where I want to work, you are my boss, we will keep that distance. And then he started to talk about veiled comments, like, would you like to come up and see my drawings? Which is very obvious what that means, but if you blatantly asked, would you like to come upstairs and sleep with me, that may not be as well taken. And if you do get up there to your room and nothing happens, then it was completely veiled. You can just pretend that nothing ever happened, whereas the other way around, it's kind of hard to pretend that nothing ever happened. And then he talked about why we use veiled speech. He used the example of Fargo, where he holds out his wallet with a little 50 sticking up out of it, and says, why don't we just take care of this in Fargo? If he had blatantly said, would you like to take this money as a bribe? If it's an honest cop, then he is going to not only get the ticket for whatever he had, get caught for the person he's kidnapped in the back of his car, and get arrested for bribery, whereas if it's a dishonest cop, it all goes away. But that's not exactly a risk you want to take, oddly enough. So using that veiled speech can kind of save yourself if there is any confusion, I guess. So if I tell someone, would you like to come and check out my drawings, and they really think they're coming and checking out my drawings and that's all they want to do, then I am completely in the clear, and I can pretend like I had no alternative motives to that. And then he concludes everything with veiled speech is not an accident or misconstruing things. It's actually a feature of our language. Alrighty, step 3, where I get to use my paper. I'm really excited about that. So I took a lot of notes. My I don't know if you can see that. My writing took 2 full pages this time. So there you go. Starts out with French, World Wide Web versus the World Spider Web, and then he talks about verbs, sentences built around where the verb goes, and then he talked about generalization. Not all constructions will always work, and changing order can sometimes change the meaning. Moving doesn't always mean change. A sentence can still have the same meaning as long as you change, if you change the word order. Then he talks about using space as a metaphor, talks about like space, state, and time, and then he talks about using force as a metaphor, forced door, forced to go, forced herself. Changing language, killing fetus versus having an abortion. And then he talks about the human intelligence, the just kind of base intelligence we all have about object, space, time, causation, and intention. Those are all good for human interaction. He also talks about metaphorical abstraction. Words and speech in human interaction, indirect speech, veiled speech. I talked about why we'd use it. And he said words and speech in human interaction is a way of managing relationships. Relationships can be friends, frat houses, or sororities, so like that feeling of being family but not actually being related in any way, shape, or form. Sexual relationships and mismatches, where one person feels more comfortable than they should, and vice versa. Becoming too comfortable with your boss, think there was some kind of like sexual tension, but there wasn't. Language needs to satisfy 2 conditions. Conveyed actual content, and negotiate and maintain the kind of relationship. We use language on 2 different levels. Literal form, which is the safest. So I'm going to the store literally means I'm going to the store. Or implied, no, that's not the word. Implicated, which means like reading between the lines. So saying, oh man, it would be a shame if your house burned down, wouldn't it? You can imply that it's a not very well veiled threat, but it's still veiled. These can also be used for polite requests, like, you know, getting me that guacamole would be awesome. It gets the message across in a conditional way, but doesn't like force on you that I have the power to do that. It's not acting like you're dominating the other person. Veiled speech is used to kind of cover yourself. So if it works, it's great. If it doesn't work, then you're completely covered and safe. And then he ends it with vagueness of language can be used to our advantage. It's a feature, not a mistake. And that's where he ended it. I saw a lot of his linguistic features as he kept a very monotone voice, and it felt very professor as him and student as I, or whoever he was speaking to, audience, kind of an idea. That kind of relationship. There was no like ask and response, but very like lecturing. He also conveyed that through his speech. The actual words he used a lot of very large words and really exercised his vocabulary, which honestly I had to rewind and rewatch and sometimes look up words that I felt like I should know. But he kept his speech very professional. Even when he was telling jokes, there was no really intonation, inflection at all. unless it was going up like a joke, like, give me that damn guacamole, or something like that. He really stayed very monotone through the whole thing, with only a very few rises and falls. And if I had an abstraction from this video, it would be your words say more than you know. Thank you.